This video is going to cover section 6.1, which continues our look on energy and respiration, as in how energy is derived for the cells. And so we'll take a brief overview of cellular respiration at this time. In cellular respiration, molecules such as glucose, they're broken down to release energy, which is then used to synthesize ATP. This is an aerobic process, meaning that it requires oxygen, and it also produces carbon dioxide. So glucose is a high energy molecule, and it's broken down to carbon dioxide and water, which are low energy molecules. And you can see the sort of a brief summary of the reaction here. So it produces ATP and carbon dioxide and water. With cellular respiration, the energy from the breakdown of glucose is released in incremental steps, and it's then used to synthesize ATP. So the energy in ATP is used for many cell reactions, and the energy is released by the breaking of a bond and release of a phosphate group, which we looked at previously. So it's a cyclical kind of a process here where ATP breaks down into ADP plus a phosphate group, and then energy is released from that. And then energy that we derive from our food intake then will kind of repeat the process of ADP obtaining another phosphate group and once again becoming ATP. You also need to understand the concept of oxidation and reduction in reactions. And essentially, oxidation then is where a substance, an atom or a molecule, it loses an electron. On the other hand, reduction is where another substance, an atom or a molecule, will gain an electron. So the substance being oxidized then is donating electrons, and it's thereby called a reducing agent. Then the substance that's being reduced is accepting electrons and is thereby called the oxidizing agent. So compounds or atoms, they contain more energy in the reduced form than they do in their oxidized form. Also, you need to be aware of NAD plus and FAD, and some enzymes, they use these particular coenzymes. NAD plus is that stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, or FAD, which is flavin adenine dinucleotide, and they act as electron carriers in reactions. So what happens is NAD plus, it receives 2 electrons and 2 H plus ions, and that forms NADH plus H plus. FAD receives 2 electrons and 2 H plus ions, thereby forming FADH2. So with the phases of cellular respiration, we'll just do a very brief overview of these 4 phases, and then in subsequent videos we will look at them in a little bit more detail. So the first part of it then is glycolysis, and so glycolysis is the breakdown of glucose to 2 molecules of pyruvate. There is a net gain of 2 ATP for every glucose molecule that's broken down to pyruvate. Now this step is what's referred to as anaerobic because oxygen is not required yet at this point. Then we have the preparatory reaction, whereby we have oxidation of pyruvate to a C2-acetyl group with coenzyme A attached. In this instance, carbon dioxide is released, and it occurs twice per glucose molecule. The third part of this would be the citric acid cycle, and this is a cyclical set of oxidation reactions that break down pyruvate. So the cycle produces carbon dioxide and 1 ATP per turn of the cycle, and it turns twice since 2 acetyl coenzyme A molecules enter per glucose molecule. Now, as I mentioned, we will be looking at these in a little bit more detail, so you don't need to be too concerned about all the details. One thing to note is that the first part of it, the glycolysis, that actually occurs within the cell cytoplasm. Then step 2 and step 3 of the process, they occur within the mitochondria. And then we have step 4, which is the electron transport chain, and this occurs actually within the membrane of the mitochondrion. So this is where electrons, they pass between carriers, and energy is released, and the electrons become lower in energy. So lower energy electrons then are received by O2, and then H plus reacts then to form H2O. So this is just a very brief overview of the process, and we will look at each of these in a little bit more detail in the next sections here. And so here's the key terms and concepts that are involved with section 6.1, and we'll look at them now, these processes in a little bit more detail.